time for the Daily Detangler. And in this detangler, I am going to take Catalyst's Elegance video and decode it a bit and how I'm processing it and breaking it down with the goal of slowing down, breaking it down, sharing what I'm seeing so that you can react to it. To do that, I'll take a look at how he examined elegance, how he atomized the process, and the tips he gave on factoring in the variables. When Catalyst talked about elegance, he shared the definition of elegant and pointed out two aspects. Aspects one is this idea that it's how it looks. And then aspect two is kind of the science behind it. So art and science, if you will, the look, the math, and that comes together into the architecture. And one of the things that he called out was the idea of elegance is, and what really resonates with him is this idea that it's two things at once. Whatever we're talking about, whether it's a framework, an artifact, a concept, a website, it's two things at once. It's unusually simple and it's surprisingly powerful. And I really related with this. One of the things that I've heard salespeople say and sales leaders say is they want something simple. And I know that they're involved in the sales conversation business, and they're trying to have conversations that are powerful and build momentum. So that's a great definition that when I think about it, helps me get my head around what am I doing to help create something simple and powerful. To do that, there's a balancing act of the right brain, left brain, the science brain, and the art brain. And when you look at this, elegance blends both science and art. This idea that something can be creative and light and loose at the same time, disciplined and tedious and doing the tedious work and analytical. But how do you do that? This sounds good in theory. What about practice? How does it work? And Catalyst broke that down into his process. I don't know if you remember this chart, but I remember copying it and thinking about it because two things really struck me about it. One was, wow, I don't necessarily think this way. And this is really interesting, the discipline to do this. And then two, the kind of the light bulb that says, oh, this is kind of how he does it. This is how he produces content that others have never seen before. This is one of the things, one of the approaches that he has. So what I thought I would do in this detangler is decode this and break it down of the breakdown and share with that to get your feedback. So the journey to elegance it contains three parts that I'm seeing. And the reason why I think it's a journey is it's ongoing. It's not like I can just sit down and be like, okay, let me be elegant now. Okay, here's my elegant slide. It's a process, and it's a continuous process, and the disciplines to do it fall into basically three groups is what I'm seeing. Examining the phenomenon, breaking it down, and then factoring in perspectives. Each of these buckets comes from his definition with the goal of resolving the phenomenon. And when I think about how that works, obviously there's a lot of C slides along the way. The approach fuels C slides because each bucket, examining the phenomenon, breaking it down, factoring in perspectives, each of those is a source of C slides, right? And can be if I'm able to follow that discipline. So let's break each phase of this journey down. Examining a phenomenon. What is a phenomenon? How do I describe a phenomenon? How do we get our head around and talk about the same phenomenon? Is the truck in the mud a phenomenon? Is a meeting with somebody a phenomenon? What is a phenomenon? And applying the scientific method to that what is a phenomenon worth tackling, and what's the definition of commonly occurring, and what does it mean to prevent people from acting, right? These are all things that I think about when I slow the tape here and double click on examining a phenomenon. And what I've seen working is this idea of breaking things down and finding the challenges that are complex challenges that the cause of the challenge is not clear, yet we observe it. It's the idea of we know it's there, but we can't name it. That's a phenomenon. We know it's happening, but we need to help people see. That could be a phenomenon. And common and relevant, the reason why that's important is that's how people will pay for it. There's economic value in tackling what's common and relevant, especially when it impacts people and impedes action. So when I look at this idea of examining the phenomenon and thinking about the attributes, what are some phenomenon that we tackle? How do we show the impact of product focus? Is that a phenomenon? I guess I'd like to make sure that I'm tracking. What do you think? Is that a phenomenon? Or the challenge in selling today, is that a phenomenon? The idea of making something clear, is that a phenomenon? How do we make the concept of outcomes tangible? Is that a phenomenon? Right? What is it? These are some examples. I don't know if I'm 100% right. So how do we clarify a phenomenon? What do you think? In the Elegance video, Catalyst shared some examples of visualizing phenomenon, like, for example, the bends or the hidden productitis challenges in the bottom right, or the idea that we're tackling an ecosystem. Resolving that or examining that phenomenon is something is making sales conversations difficult. What is that? And what Catalyst said is companies want and need control in how they sell. The control is a myth because buyers are in control. And that's why we need to follow the scientific method. So he gave some examples of how he applies the principles and also the scientific method to illuminate some phenomena. From there, breaking it down, it's breaking that down into to parts, analyzing each piece from many different angles. When I slow the tape on that, what does that mean? It means that we have an understanding of what we're looking at, and then also breaking it down. This is the 21-step process, the tedious work. How do we break it down and make it relevant? And look at it from a lot of different angles based on reality-based inputs, right? Not assumptions. So things like atomizing big concepts, doing the tedious work, making buckets mutually exclusive and collectively exhausted, factoring in the reality of a top-down perspective or the reality of a functional view, client perspective. And then breaking it down from different angles also includes this idea of those that are processing things emotively or analytically or conceptually, those that are more task-based or want examples. Each of those biases or filters that people have, how do we factor those in to get to the idea of everybody seeing how to break it down together? So those are some of the attributes that I was thinking about when it comes to breaking it down. What do you think? Do you think these are attributes of breaking down the phenomenon? And then what are some examples of breaking it down? What kind of things have I seen us do when we engage in clarifying the scope, or we engage in the tedious work to find the subcomponents? We stay in our role to focus on what we're talking about and then share our perspectives. And Catalyst works to bring the group along, and the group seeing the components. And then asking, what proof do we have that this breakdown is real and not just conceptual or in somebody's head? How do we know it actually happened? How can we prove it? So some examples that Catalyst showed in the Elegance video to break it down were the charts here around an outcome, the idea of following the money and understanding economic value, and how the organization itself is really organized by product, yet customers want what's possible, and that creates friction. And then the idea of how this all fits together, or how this all breaks apart, leveraging our scientific methods and approaches to do that, to think through what is the ecosystem, how are people learning, what's the group dynamic, how do we break that down, how do we break down the economic value, how do we break down the communication theory so that it all fits together. So the phenomenon is driven by science, and also the idea of breaking it down is part of that, that idea of being disciplined. If a client doesn't see the economic value, there'll be friction, and Catalyst shared that. So helping people see involves, when we break things down, not only the approach, but the empathy and factoring in the understanding. So that helps us get to elegant by doing that type of work. And then the final bucket of getting to elegant on this journey is factoring in perspective, synthesizing information into something consumable, because it's been broken down, because it's tied to a real world phenomenon that's clear. This disassembled or atomized view is brought together into something that is quote unquote elegant, that resolves the phenomenon. So that means something like bringing parts together, focused on what's working and what actually works, taking an iterative approach to tighten it with inputs from others. And it's, this idea of building something is focused on the among, the many, not a rotated view to one person. So what are some examples there of factoring it in? What I've seen work is what do others see? Asking those questions, keep being aware of my bias as I'm filtering or processing visuals, and asking questions and engaging, and being put on the spot. What is a tangle, and how have you used that? Where have you tested it and tried it? How do we synthesize that and package that concept of the phenomenon into something digestible, right? And I have more work to do on that. So examples of factoring in that are these charts from the Elegance video, where basically it's this idea of the elegant view comes into clarity around this non-linear approach to tackling the economic and commercial challenge of sales conversations. It's not linear. How do we factor that in? How do we take an organic approach? Because that's what growth looks like. And illuminating these concepts and making them clear comes from following the journey of elegance. And when we bring this together and factoring it in and sharing with other people, that's where connection and translation happens. And people that we share it with can actually see themselves in these things, can see the impact of what we're talking about, whether it's a hero's journey or what buyers are looking for, or the components of a story. These things make sense, though they're hard to perhaps actually execute. They make sense and are very relatable, right? And it's about the what and the why more than the how. So this has been an interesting journey. And what I did was I slowed down the idea of getting to elegant. And what have I learned in that process? I've learned that by doing this, thinking through each of the variables of the breakdown, allows me to create a bit of a mini scorecard and provide some examples of following this journey that I can apply in the area of, for example, tangles. And by slowing down and doing that type of work, advance in a structured way so that I can be more relatable, sharing my observations about phenomenons, the phenomenon of tangles, breaking that tangles down, following the tedious work process, visualizing along the way, and then making it relatable based on real world reality of how that happens. Right. And I have more work to do, but I know that this journey can yield a huge impact in elegant outputs, and it's worth the journey. So speeding up by slowing down is one of our expectations, and that's what this is about to me. Is we look at elegance, and this is where the content came from, the Exploring Elegance video that Catalyst put out a few months ago. So I hope this was helpful. I'd love your feedback on this format where I'm trying to decode and come up with a structure to decode concepts from Catalyst, and look forward to your feedback on the approach. I changed the formula for the detanglers today. Also, the tone and the stories, etc. How do I provide this type of information without lecturing? And how do I make this actionable? I look forward to your feedback on this, and have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.